Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're looking at a security issue within WordPress that you sometimes pick up from auditors. You see there's been an issue for some time with the users API. So we can see this on the CVE website. And this is the exploit here, CVE 20175487. And pretty much what happens here is people look at your REST API and go ahead and look at all the users, pick out their usernames and attempt to log in to your WordPress website by brute forcing the login. Now we all know that we need to protect the login pages. I've got plenty of videos on that already, but what happens if you end up with a security report like I have before for my customers, where they say, look, we're trying to pass a penetration test audit, Essential 8 for government, something along those lines, and we need to be able to block this API. What do you do? Well, the first thing I did is wrote a couple of different gists. So I'll share the link to the gists in the comment below. If you take a look at this, you can see that what I've done on these ones is simply removed the endpoint. So I've said if a user is logged in, don't remove it, but if they aren't logged in, then remove it. Now this has one slight flaw, and that is that if the user is logged in as a subscriber, so you have open registration for something like WooCommerce, it's still accessible for someone who's logged in as a WooCommerce user. So it's not ideal. Really what you want to be doing is checking some capabilities. The second thing as well is you don't really want to 404 it. So a 404 error just says this doesn't exist, and that can make issues for your block editor. So when we look at this particular tab here, you can see what I've done is created a plugin. So this plugin for this gist, this GitHub repo, sorry, this has a full plugin available for you to fix the disclosure of user information. And what this one does is quite a bit different. So let's take a look through the code and I'll explain to you exactly what's happening here. So we'll just zoom that up a little bit so it's a bit easier to read. So this is all PHP CS compatible. So I've put the code sniffer on. It's all written to standards. So you should be able to run this anywhere you need to and making sure that this is going to work okay. So the first thing I do is just initialize a simple plugin file. We have activations to flush rewrite rules. Now those rewrite rules there, you don't necessarily need them, but I just do it as a default with most of the plugins that I create. So that's all just been thrown in there as pretty much boilerplate. When we get down here, we start to get into the meat and bones of this particular plugin. It's relatively simple, but it's worth knowing what we're checking and why. So this is what we call a permission callback hardener. Everything's been pre-appended with MRK, which is my initials. And that's just so that if somebody else has permission callback hardener as a bare function, you're not going to get namespacing issues with your code. So here we've got a permission callback, and all it does is just say any particular REST endpoint that you want to put you're not allowed to authenticate, you can chuck this on the end of it. That's all it does. So we're going to use this function over and over for any REST API endpoints that we want to callback harden. And all this does is takes the existing callback, looks at the request, and throws a new WP error. That's it. So it's kind of a bit ugly, but it works. Next, we have this item here to add the permissions to the actual individual REST API endpoints. And as you can see, I've put all the function comments and things like that in to try and keep it as clear as you can. So the first thing that we do is check for the user's endpoint. And if I've got that, I get the route from that endpoint. So in this space here on the REST API, there's like an object, a big array of information. And right here, we're saying, get the route that has the callback on it. This is the default callback. Now, by default for users, to get a list of users, the permission callback is nothing because anybody can get it. So this now goes ahead and grabs that. I need to change those from 403s to 401s, so I'll check on that, but that's what it's going to do. So the endpoint now for any users inside of here, and so that's all the individual user IDs, along with users, will all end up returning a 401, which is that you are not allowed. Now, the interesting thing is this is called by a filter. So next we end up with our final element here of the plugin. And this filter says the REST API endpoints, when we get that filter them all out and add this permission. But we can't do that before the initializer. Now, this is when we start to have to understand a little bit more about how WordPress works. You see, WordPress has what we call pluggable functions, and the user permission feature is a pluggable function. This means that certain things have to happen with the session and the user before you can check what that user can do. And this is done in the initialization of the WordPress application. That means that if I was to do the user can edit post, for example, up here within my permission callback hardener, then this function will not have access to the pluggable function, and that means that always permissions will return false. If I also go to the REST endpoint and do it inside of there, because the initialization is not run and that thread's not there, these pluggable functions won't be available. And as a result, I won't get what I want. So I, first of all, in my initializer, so this is really the starting point of the plugin down here, we say, if I've got the user can function, the current user can, and the current user can edit posts, then filter out the REST points. So right here, because if the user cannot edit posts, then they don't need this function. They don't need it to run. So let's go ahead and see what this actually does. So now inside my REST API here for my default local, you can see that I get a list of users because I'm logged in. If I go to a different browser, this is inside Firefox, we can see that no, I can't get anything. You cannot view, you're not allowed, and it responds with a 401. Now, if I were to go into the edit post page and just remove the API endpoint, so to do that, or to 401 it, I can simply come into here, and let me just comment out this element here where I'm checking the user capability temporarily, and we'll save that. It's going to throw an error because of PHP-CS, so this file being read is just my sniffer. So let's now go back here, and we'll refresh that, and you'll notice that the sidebar, I can no longer select the user because I don't have access to the API endpoint. If I was to go to DevTools now, we can see right here, I'm getting a 403 forbidden on the user endpoint. So that's what's causing all of this. If I go back now and add the capability back, the capability check, then we'll go back into here and refresh. Now the author selector is back because this is populated via the REST API. And when we look at the user local APIs, we don't have any 403s inside of here now because the JSON API is returning the user list for us. And that means that it's populating that drop-down list. So we can see that there. So here we've got the WP users. We're getting all those authors to populate that drop-down, and it works okay. Now, if I was to not return a 401 and return a 404, it starts throwing errors inside the WordPress editor. So you have to be careful how you do this. If you just said straight up, just remove this, and I've blocked it inside, say, Cloudflare or my HT access files, or using some sort of firewall rule, you would need to use an IP check and make sure that all your users have their IP in a given list so they can access the admin. And I know some people that do that. They also do that for that login page. Again, check the tutorials on my YouTube channel to be able to see that kind of thing. So this is what this all does. So when you install this plugin, you'll just see you've got the MRK REST permissions. This is the plugin right here. All I did was install it and activate it. If you want to make use of it, you can go to GitHub, go to the top URL that's here, and under code, just say download zip right there. And that will give you a zip file of the plugin able to be installed. And again, I kept it nice and simple so that everyone can see that code relatively easily and know exactly what it's doing. So you're not introducing any kind of security risk to your website by putting this plugin in there, and you're not introducing something that could see you violate sort of user terms or have some sort of coding standard that's missed. I have included a phpcs.xml file in here. So you can see there's a couple of different things just with license and link tags and things that I turn off inside the docs area. This is just to reduce a bit of the coding that I needed to do inside the plugin file. It's only really for documentation and class commenting because, I'm not using any classes inside of this anyway, so it doesn't matter too much. But this is just a customized standard file just to reduce a little bit some of those code sniffer errors that get thrown out. But otherwise, this is all good to go. So the other access tools that I have with the stop user access, you can use this user logged in. So if you're just using something like WP Codebox, you can use the anonymous filter function. You paste this inside WP Codebox, and this will work well enough if you're not using WooCommerce and you're not concerned about logged in users seeing this endpoint. Again, it will 404, but it will still pass that exception test for you. So if you're just looking at a simple way to be able to do this and you don't want to install the plugin, you can use that inside WP Codebox if you're using that. The second item, the registered filter, this can be pasted inside a child theme. So if you take this and paste it inside a functions child theme, this will also fix the security bug. But in my opinion, it's not quite as good as using a 401. The other thing as well is with my plugin, if you chose to change that permission. So if, for example, you wanted to up the permission from edit post in the user capability to something else, for example, you'd use user list, something like that. So only super admins can change the ownership of posts and things like that. You could also do that to increase the permission level if you feel that you want to be able to do that within the editing area. Now, this REST API isn't used everywhere. So if I'm inside my post list and I have the author list right here, that author list is not populated by the REST API. And when I click edit on that, this one is on that author list. But if I do a quick edit, I found that this drop down here for the quick edit in the author area, this will still populate if the REST API is off. So I just found if you're editing posts and you've got that ability to change authors, there's no point doing anything further. Really, that REST API for editing posts seems to be the best solution that I've found. And of course, we're using the proper 401 error, which means you're forbidden, you're not authenticated to use this when you're not logged in with that capability. When you are logged in with that capability, it works, and the Gutenberg block editor all works as expected. So I hope this video is helpful for you. Remember, the code is below. I've also linked over to a blog article with some step-by-steps about what we've done here and how you can use this code. So take a look at that. And if you've got any questions, leave a comment below or reach out to me and I'll get back to you as quick as I can. Anyway, happy coding, enjoy your WordPressing, and I'll see you in the next video.